Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me, I have author David Weill. David, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. So we're here to talk about your book today. What is that title of your book?
It's a book called All That Really Matters.
All That Really Matters. Well, that is a very important title, it sounds like. What is this? What is the synopsis of your story?
Well, it's about all that really matters.
That's a pretty big topic.
I use a protagonist named Dr. Joe Bosco, who's a transplant surgeon who has a steep rise in his career and then gets himself into quite a bit of difficulty and has a steep decline and tries to pull himself out of it. And in that process, he's trying to figure out what really matters most to him. And the relationships around him are also very much in play. There's a romantic interest in the story. And the impact of doing that kind of work on all these romantic situations is an important part of the book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's all that really matters. I think we all kind of wrestle with that from time to time as human beings in general, trying to figure out balance between life, work, family, passions, and the like. Now, I know from just reading the synopsis of the story and then reading your bio, it sounds like you have a lot of maybe parallels with the story being in the medical profession yourself, and then the story taking place as a protagonist of as a doctor. So, what was the inspiration behind you wanting to write this story?
Yeah, the hospital environment was a world that I lived in, and I also saw a lot of different characters, people at their best, and I saw people at their worst,
Oh, yeah.
and I would include myself in that category. And the characters that I write about in the book are real life characters. They're combinations sometimes of people that I worked with, and sometimes they're actual people that I worked with. And none of them were invented out of thin air, nor was the story invented out of thin air. It's not
Oh,
science fiction. It's
no.
it's just fiction.
Yeah.
I explore a lot of themes that are real life.
Can you kind of go into your back history, your story, or your back history and experience in the medical profession for those who have not read your bio yet?
I grew up really wanting always to be a doctor. I have a mom who's a nurse and a dad who's a doctor, and so I
Oh,
was
wow.
very much focused on being a physician and started working in hospitals when I was 15. And
Wow.
I love the hospital environment. I thought it was so rich, not only as a place to make a career, but also just for the stories. You saw people that were very sick and at their most vulnerable, and you worked
Mhm.
with some interesting characters. And became a transplant doctor, really addicted to the ups and downs of it, the roller coaster,
Yeah.
how you could change somebody's life with one operation. And I knew that I was always going to write about it. And I wrote a
Yeah.
book that was published in 2021, which was straight memoir
Oh, okay,
about my
cool.
experience at Stanford running their transplant program. And I decided that I didn't go quite far enough with some of the themes because of some of the sensitivities around what I was writing,
Memoirs,
and
yeah.
decided to write a novel where I can fictionalize a lot of what I saw.
Interesting, interesting. So to protect those that you wanted to talk about, you put them in a more fictional setting so that those stories can be expressed.
That's exactly right,
Okay.
Ryan. And I not only did it for the sensitivities of the people that I worked with and the institutions that I worked
Of
for, but
course.
also, patient confidentiality issues. It was sometimes
Yeah.
difficult to write about real life patients, as I did in my memoir, just because
Mhm.
of the confidentiality issues. So
Yeah,
I felt that writing the novel was very freeing in a lot of ways. I could really go here and there and get into the themes that I cared about.
absolutely. What kind of themes were you touching on in this novel?
Grief, love,
Mhm.
loss,
Yeah,
sacrifice,
yeah.
redemption,
And
which I think is a big part of the story because we all seek it. We all make mistakes in life. And what's great about this world, I think, is that redemption's available to all of us. And I really wanted to show this character as somebody that grew
Hmm.
throughout the story. I think readers will find Dr. Bosco, at one point at the beginning of the story, and then find him at a very different point at the end of the story.
Yeah, you definitely want those dynamic characters to keep them coming back because at first they're it sounds like they're not wanting to necessarily root for the character, but as they get to know him deeper and deeper, he becomes, you peel the layers back and they go, okay, well, he's just like everybody else. He has all these insecurities. Yeah, he might be confident or maybe even arrogant in his abilities, but he's got things he's dealing with just like everybody else does.
You got it. That's exactly right, Ryan.
Yeah.
I very much wanted to, at the beginning of the story, have readers maybe think to themselves, well, okay, I know this guy. I've seen the TV programs about doctors. This is like the rest of the arrogant doctors that I know. Um, and I don't think they're going to think that at the end of the story.
Hope not.
I don't want them to, because I think the characters that patients see in the hospital, the people that present themselves in white coats, are often a lot more complicated than they think.
Oh yeah, people are not as simple as they like people to think. We're a lot more complicated, especially, I mean, oh my, the amount of time you guys spend in the hospitals working with people on sick people, trying to make them better. Holy cow, there's just so many stories and nuances and, things you have dealing with while watching other people go through, like you said, their best and their worst days. That'll definitely affect you on your day to day and how they evolve as a human.
No doubt, and I'm very interested in that particular topic, identity.
Hmm.
How when we look at ourselves in the mirror in the morning, what do we see? And for many, many years, I saw myself fairly unidimensionally as a transplant doctor,
Right.
and I felt that responsibility very heavily.
Hmm.
And, in this phase of my life, as I've gotten older, I try to look at myself as more multidimensional than that.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm very interested in the subject of identity.
Yeah, it's so easy to do as someone someone like especially yourself who goes through so much time and energy to become the doctor. Because I mean, how much schooling do you have to go through?
4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and then my post medical training was 6 years. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
when I was a full-fledged physician, ready to go practice independently, I was 32 years old.
That's insane. And by that time, like for myself, I got out of college at 22, 23, was in working, been, by the time I hit 32 years, I've been in the same profession for 10 years. And you're in essence starting your career as someone who's got all this knowledge and now is ready to execute it.
Yeah, it was interesting because at that time, all my friends that I grew up with had already married and had kids,
Yeah.
and they had a house, and I was meanwhile making $20,000 a year as a medical resident,
Oh
and
my God.
working 100 hours a week, and didn't have much of a life,
Well,
so I
right.
was a little envious at that point.
Absolutely. Well, you're definitely eager to get started, and it's so easy when it comes to identity to wrap yourself in that job of this is what I am. This is only what I am. And I think, I mean, it's not till we get older and you go through I'm going to say the drudgery of just working your normal day to day. I mean, everyone deals with that 9 to 5 or 12, 15-hour days like you've been doing probably for about 10, 12, 15 years. You're like, I'm tired. What else is there to do than just work? Even a job as noble as being a doctor or other professions and the like. It's so hard to just like, what am I other than doctor? What else am I interested in? How do I, transport myself to other th minds of thinking, ways of thinking? It's just very challenging. How did
Yeah,
you,
it was, sorry to interrupt. It
oh,
was
you're
very
fine, you're fine.
much though an exercise in delayed gratification. I got married later,
Sure.
had my kids later. I started to make a living later.
Yeah.
That's the whole exercise, really.
Kind of stresses your patience, I imagine, at that point. Like you said, you see everyone doing what you want to do, but it's just the profession you chose. It just takes longer because that's a huge skill. It's not just, oh, well, we can replace that part later. Like, no, they kind of need that. That's important. People aren't just cars you can replace pieces and parts to as easy as just go in the store and order a new part. Yeah, especially in your particular area of transplant physician or surgeon, physician, both
Physician, yeah. So I
physician.
didn't actually do the operation. I ran the transplant program, and
Okay.
part of the team
Okay.
was we had surgeons on the team,
Oh, sure.
and they had an important but very small in terms of time duration role. Their role was 6 to 8 hours the night that we did the transplant. So my team took care of everybody before the transplant, through the waiting list period. I picked out the donor organs for them.
Wow.
I had already put them on the waiting list, and then the surgeons did the operation and then would hand them back to our team, and then we took care of them for the rest of their lives.
Wow, that
So
is insane. And it's a follow-up thing forever and ever. That person who dealt with the transplant, who had that particular organ, they come back to you and go, "Hey, how's everything operating?" You do a good check on
yeah,
them.
we and that's Ryan, an important point because we then get very close to our patients because we know them for
Oh
many
yeah.
many years, and we know them, not only by first name, but we know their family by first name. We know their dogs' names. We know everything about them. And one of the things that really attracted me to the field was how close the interpersonal relationships became with our patients and their
Mhm.
families. I mean, we were, we spoke very frankly to one another. We told the truth to each other.
We
We
want
acted
that.
very much like trusted people. And now what's great is, you know, after doing this for so many years, I have thousands of patients out there that contact me that actually watch podcasts like this,
Oh, cool.
read my books, and really want to stay in touch with me because they consider me an important part of their life, which I'm
100%.
forever grateful for.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got something as scary as, organ death and we need to replace this, you go to someone like yourself who's got the knowledge, the skill set, the confidence to say, yes, we can improve your life, and then it actually happens. Yeah, I'm going to be trusting you for the rest of my life too. That's a huge
Yeah,
avenue of trust
yeah.
that needs to be developed for something that severe, that vital to their survival. When that came to actually writing your story, your character, making him dynamic, was that a challenge for you to put it on paper?
It really was because, it was interesting about writing a memoir first as your first book because
Yeah.
the main character is me.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about writing a novel and taking this character through this journey was to make sure that he wasn't so flat on the page, as my book editor likes to say. Make him three-dimensional, make him complicated, make sure that he's not just a caricature of what we think of as an arrogant doctor, and you could actually predict every single move he makes.
Yeah.
My character was more, I think, more nuanced than that because he cared deeply about what he did. He definitely had flaws. He was definitely arrogant,
Hmm.
and his arrogance got him into some trouble. But he also cared about the people around him, and he was wounded in many ways
Hmm.
as a young person. He had
Yeah.
parents that were difficult. He had a very demanding father, especially, who had very high expectations of him. A Nobel Prize laureate,
Oh yeah.
and so if you grow up as the only son of a Nobel Prize laureate, issues might arise.
Yeah, that's a big shadow to come out of, big shoes to fill, and all of the other cliches that have to do with trying not to become eclipsed by your parents or even siblings in some cases,
That's
job
right.
or success. What other challenges did you find with writing this particular, not because it was your first fiction novel?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It
what
was
what
my
other
first
challenges you find?
novel. It's my first novel, and I'm actually writing a book right now that
Oh, good on you.
my publisher wants by the first of the year, which
Oh wow.
seems daunting, but anyway, here we are.
Yeah,
Enough of my troubles.
you
Um, I
got to vent
I
sometime.
think the yeah, I think the other challenge to writing fiction, and I'm going to go back to it for sure. Perhaps even after this book I'm working on now is complete, is to leave some unpredictability in the story. I think what happens is, especially for first time novelists, is the story goes along and it's predictable, it's no one's fault. It's just the way things evolve sometimes. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I had some twists and turns that might surprise the reader. Uh, I'll leave it up to the reader to tell me if I succeeded in that or not.
Well, right.
But that was something I was aware might be a pitfall.
I mean, well, did you use any kind of like beta readers, or were you and the editor pretty much the only two that were looking at it prior to it coming out?
My editor was the most intense one looking at it, but I think I needed beta readers, and I still do with the current project. because, book editors read books differently, as you're probably well aware, than the
Yes.
average reader out there.
Hmm.
So I actually gathered up all kinds of different people, maybe a half dozen or so
Oh,
that
that's
I
pretty
thought could
healthy.
read the book. And yeah, and I wanted to make sure also, which is another important point, that I had both male and female readers to it because, one thing that's interesting about fiction is the preponderance of women reading fiction versus men,
Hmm.
and whether or not a story appeals to women as well as men is important, I think.
Yeah,
And so I had folks that I thought were thoughtful, fantastic people read the book and give me really meaningful feedback.
that's great.
And the part that I struggled with the most, though, and I changed actually three times, was the ending.
Wow.
I
Oh my
pretty much
goodness.
had yeah, and it was months of work to change it. Um, I, um, I pretty much had the story and then couldn't quite decide how to land the plane.
Hmm.
And I did try out a few different endings, and I think I settled on the right one.
Cool.
The first, which wasn't the first one I wrote.
Endings are so hard because that leaves you with the reader either wanting more for future reads or that whole endeavor. Now they got a sour taste in their mouth, or which wasn't a satisfying ending. And endings are just so
Yes,
challenging. How do you wrap up everything? Is this something that's going to continue? Did the ending land right with the readers? And you can't predict it until you throw it out there. And that's the
that's
hard
exactly
part.
right. Yeah,
But
that's exactly right. I mean, a lot of books about writing that you read talk a lot about the beginning of the book, and I understand that why that is. But to me, the ending of the book is more challenging, especially as it relates to fiction.
well,
And I struggle with it.
you probably dealt with more cliched endings. And like you said, you wanted to have some twists and turns, make it not as predictable. And I mean, that probably took a lot of brainstorming. And did you work with family or friends to try to come up with ideas? Or because I know just living in your brain is
I,
hard.
yeah, I wasn't short on the ideas. I was a little bit short on what the right idea was,
Fair
and
enough. Fair enough.
so I had these three different endings, and they were really quite different. They weren't just subtly different; they were
Yeah.
quite different.
Oh, okay.
And the one that I originally wrote, um, I thought, yep, I got it, perfect. And then I sent it to my editor, and she said, no, 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 no.
Oh.
And when she says no loudly. And so I then tested it out, that particular ending, on these six or so beta readers, and they agreed that
Oh
it
man.
wasn't quite right.
Ugh,
And so I
that's
had to
hard.
kill my 40 pages of ending, and
Oh.
start again. And then I did the second ending, and I didn't like it,
Oh,
and didn't even
really?
really
Okay.
send anything around. And then I did my third ending and sent that one around. Everybody said, yeah, 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 absolutely.
Oh yeah,
So
you need that external sounding board because what we think is going to work out doesn't land necessarily. And editors, like I said, I mean, they are pivotal. I can't explain enough with especially new authors who try to bypass the editor stage, which just blows my mind sometimes. Like
yeah, mine too.
yeah, you can't. You really can't. Like, I mean, maybe even if you are excellent at the writing craft and you're excellent at grammar and all the, nuances with that or aspects with that, you are so close to the project.
Yes.
It is best to have some other pair of eyes. I mean, even imagine this as a doctor working on a patient who is as complicated of a process of as a transplant. You having a team is going to be leaps and bounds beyond better, more thorough. Think of everything possible that could go wrong or right with a group rather than by yourself.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
and I've actually, since I started my writing journey, I've gotten a chance to meet some pretty famous, well accomplished authors.
Oh, cool.
Michael Lewis and Danny Shapiro and Walter Isaacson. People, two of Walter and Michael, I knew from New Orleans growing up, and it's interesting how all of the writers that I've met have told me how key the editor is, and I kind of knew that because I'm working with somebody
Yeah.
not only in my first book, my second book, but now my third book, and she uniformly makes my books better. I mean, every time it's 100%, and so I don't know how anyone could possibly write without one.
I I don't either. I mean, just from my first experience, the editor threw back a bunch of notes and everything and goes, I don't really understand this aspect of it. Can you create something to improve it? And of course, I'm like, I don't understand it. What do you mean you don't understand this particular point of the story? And I saw what he was mentioning, and so ended up writing a, 2, 3 page story to go along with the actual like explaining of what the that particular aspect of the book was. Yeah, that right there was the cornerstone to making all other books later down the line matter and tie in together. It was incredible, just that extra feedback, what it can do for you.
You're exactly right. And I'm fortunate to have met the person, Claire Wachtel, who has edited my books, and
Hmm.
I feel very lucky in that way. And it feels very much like actually the medical mentors I had when I was learning how to do transplant medicine. It's the same relationship. She tells me, and sometimes she has to tell me again, and sometimes she says it softly, and sometimes she says it loudly, and
Yeah.
I respond to it, and in the same way that I responded when people were trying to teach me medicine,
Right.
I find it very similar.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's mentorship. That's really what it is. It's mentorship.
Yes,
It's learning a whole
yes.
other craft too. You might be really good at writing, but telling a story, stringing things together, there's so many different aspects to it that you have to relearn or learn a little more deeply before you can really translate it to something that's going to go public. Now, how long did it take you to go from idea to publication?
From the time I started putting pen to paper, it was about 2.5 years
All
to
right.
get it onto the bookshelf. So not terribly long. The first book took me more time, even though I knew the story because it was memoir.
Yeah.
I got through this one a little bit more quickly. I learned some things along the way with the first book, which is nice.
Yeah.
And so it moved along nicely, I think. It didn't feel like it was so long that it was taking forever. But,
Right.
you certainly listen, and I'm sure in your podcast you've had novelists talk about a 10-year, journey and so forth. That's that's probably patience that I don't have, to work on a book for 10 years, but
Yeah.
maybe one day, maybe one day.
Hopefully not. I mean, it's just like anything else. As you do more, you do it more often. It becomes you learn your process. You learn what works best for you. You look at a product and go, that is not good. Get rid of it. Start over. Whew. And it eliminates a lot of time wasted that you sit there pondering. Well, should I keep this? Can I like no? This is not good. This is not to your standard. Remove it. Start again. Take the framework. Improve it. That really helps a lot. I mean, for mine, it took me about 10, 15 years of working on a story, but it was a lot of gaps in the middle because of just living and raising a family and the like. But as you start doing it and consistently, it's a different story. It usually comes a lot faster, especially if it's something that's so close to the chest and you are very intimately knowledge on the medical practices, and then obviously your story as the memoir. How long did the memoir take you?
More like 5 years.
5 years? Okay.
It was slower for all the reasons that you say, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't work every day on it.
No.
I would leave it for a little while, and I had a lot going on in my life
Yeah.
at that time, and so it did take longer. But I think, for instance, with this third book that I'm writing, I feel it, you know, more efficient. I'm writing consistently. I'm hitting the mark that better, and it'll be out in late 2025. So
Oh, great.
yeah, I feel like things are kind of moving along with it. So
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
gratified.
if you kind of have your routine and kind of like just working out okay, every day, you have a little bit. You do 20 minutes to an hour. It'll come by very fast. You do a little bit every day, all of a sudden you got a great product. So are you still actively working in the medical field while you're writing books too?
What I do is I do transplant related consulting work right now. So I consult with hospitals and transplant programs specifically that are having
Mm.
all kind of different issues.
Oh,
And
okay.
I work coast to coast on that. So I work all
Oh,
over the
wow.
United States, a little bit internationally as well, but
Yeah.
all over the United States. And I'm more coach than quarterback these days, and I to use a football metaphor that I never get tired of.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting perspective, having been on the front lines for so long, 20
Hmm.
years, to see it now, from the press box is interesting. I feel like I understand the field even better than I did when I was on the front lines because I see this broad perspective of
Oh, of course.
transplant programs all over the country and even all over the world. So it's
Wow.
really been great. It's been a great second chapter, I have to say. I was when I walked out of Stanford and I left, I wasn't sure what was next. I knew that it was time to go, but I wasn't sure what was next. But I'm very grateful that
Of
I can do what
course.
I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the fact that you have the time in the trenches and coming on as a consultant, I can imagine they take your experience and time in and all that very seriously and consider what you have to say on all the different not projects, but different cases that you have to consult on. And then when you talk about going coast to coast, are you literally flying from east to west, or is it all just doing Zoom calls or both, or
It's
how does
really all of the above. And then,
yeah.
of course, with COVID, I was just really hitting my stride in the consulting world when COVID hit. I was getting really busy on that front, and it all went to Zoom. And then now it's a little bit of both. I think we've all learned to do things by Zoom, which is great.
It is.
Anytime I can avoid one of the airlines, that's a good day. And
Too.
so I do move around quite a bit, but I can do a lot of it by Zoom, which is great.
I'm sure that helps with the just the long hours.
Yes,
Travel can be very tiring, so it's
yes,
better for your health, I assume, as well.
I'm sure of it. I'm actually
Yeah,
sure of it.
yeah, yeah. Your family probably likes having you home too.
Definitely.
Mhm.
We just recently empty nested for the first time. We
Oh,
sent
wow.
our second daughter off to college just this last month, and
Wow.
it's an interesting phase of life, and I'm still getting used to it. I think it's going to take a little while. So.
The quiet is affecting you, I assume.
Very much so. Very much so.
Oh my, and then you have two daughters. What are their ages, if you don't mind my
So
asking?
20, no, not at all.
Okay,
22 and 18. So one just
2022.
finished college this last
Starting.
spring, and then one
Yeah.
just started. And, it's just like anybody with kids, you get used to them around the house. You get used to the sort of soundtrack of the house, rap music a lot of the times in my house. And, and then, now it's a different phase that my
Yeah.
wife and I are going through. So.
It's strange. I got a few years before that happens. Mine are 10 and 8. They're wild and crazy little boys. So it'll be
Well,
strange when they go.
yeah, I think you'll find next week they'll be going to college.
Oh my
So,
God. Yeah, my oldest looked at me the other day. It was like they have their birthdays in April, and he goes, "Dad, do you know that I'm a decade old?" I said, "Go to your room. Just don't even talk to me anymore." Decade old. I've been a dad for 10 years already. Like,
I
where did the
know.
time go? I don't know where the
Uh,
time went. It's
it's
abs
amazing, and I spent some of those early years in the hospital quite a bit.
Oh, sure.
When my kids were your kids' age,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I stepped out is, they were going to high school, and I just didn't feel like I was there enough,
No.
either
Yeah.
physically or emotionally, and so
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we all take that responsibility very seriously. And
Hmm.
I felt like it was time for me to engage more deeply with my daughter. So it
Absolutely.
was a decision I made. Yeah,
It's probably for the better decision. I mean, I'm sure the
I
field
think so.
misses you, but you're still in there, you're still working, but you're able to be there for your family. And it's so hard. Again, back to identity. It's so hard to try to pick and point and choose where you put most of your time.
That's
And
right.
I've heard a lot from I work with a lot of sailors and Navy guys, and
Hmm.
the Navy
Yeah,
takes a lot of their time,
definitely.
underway, training, you name it.
Definitely.
And a couple different times, the Navy and these sailors have had arguments and disagreements. And they go, listen, I will leave the Navy right now with 2 years left to go. I will not retire at 20. I will retire at 18 because if you make me choose between my family, that's going to be there till the day I die, or the Navy that'll be there for 2 more years, I will choose my family every single
Yeah,
time. But yeah, it's
right.
just picking and choosing what's important to you, what matters, right?
Yeah, just like every other person you've ever had on your podcast, I write about what's on my mind, and
Yeah.
these themes, and some people would call them obsessions, are things that I want to write about. So
Yeah. Obsession does make good stories. So
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid
it
so.
does. Do your girls are they following in your footsteps as a doctor? Are they going different routes or medical field, different routes?
No, I'm married to a nurse, and
Oh,
neither one of
cool.
them wanted to be, and even close to being in the medical field. I mean,
Interesting.
they're
Interesting.
they're they're actually closer to being in the writing field. One of them is
Oh,
in
really?
communications. Yeah, my older daughter is into communications, and my younger daughter wants to be a journalist, like a straight out, flat,
Oh,
traditional kind of journalist. And both of them actually impress me as writers. It's interesting to read young people's writing, especially if they're your daughters, and see what's on their mind and how they express themselves. I found that very interesting.
I'm sure they were very excited about you writing stories then, or writing a book, writing two books now.
They have been. They've read drafts that are near final. I don't give them the so-called vomit draft. I give them the near final one,
Like
and
that term.
and they it's interesting because they also find out some things about me they didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. And they ask me, especially about my first book, which was memoir. They're like, Dad, I didn't know that. I was like, well, how could you?
Yeah.
And so, is, if nothing else, I've at least written some things that my daughters will come to understand me better by.
Yeah, and it's something they can have a safe a keepsake
Yep.
as time goes on, they get older and they always have that part of you there, which is just cool. It's the thing we always leave behind, with our legacies, our children and our art, and you have both now. So, which is amazing. And I mean, all the patients you've helped save throughout the years and care for throughout the years, that's a huge undertaking as well. But so when it came to like actually getting your books published, how did you discover your publisher, or did someone reach out to you? How did that whole process start?
When I wrote my memoir, my first book, I had just left Stanford, and I basically it was a cold email instead of cold call, but I cold emailed
Okay.
um, 50 agents in New York, I think,
Wow.
and exactly one agreed to represent me,
It's pretty good.
and yeah, and we got a book deal, and
Wow.
then with my second book, my first agent retired. I got a second agent who then shop the book around. We got it published. And then same thing with my third book. And so it's gone pretty well. There's so many different avenues now to getting published that I find it all very interesting. I read about it a lot because I'm
Mhm.
interested in it. And I don't think one's better than the other, but I've been, fortunate to get the books out. I want them on the bookshelf, and
Yeah.
if a publishing house wants to publish my book, I'm all for it. And
Yeah.
we should just go forward. The one thing that I found that's really interesting to me, I should have probably known, but I didn't, is the different phases of this. There's the writing of the book, and there's the marketing of the book, and they're very different phases. One it uses one muscle, one uses an entirely different muscle, but both are really important. And
Uh-huh.
I've come to learn that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Are you a natural extrovert or are you more introverted?
I don't know the answer to that. It's funny. I mean, I spend a lot of time alone writing my books, and I feel very much like an introvert. I'm walking around in comfortable clothes and watching the FedEx guy deliver stuff to our house, and getting first name basis with him.
Yeah.
And I'm alone with my dogs, and my wife's not there, and now my kids aren't there, and in that way I feel very much like an introvert. But then I talk about the book with somebody like you, and I go in
Yeah.
front of audiences and give talks about you know my transplant career or my books or something, and I feel like an extrovert.
Yeah.
So I think it's funny. I mean, I think in any one day I'm both.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think they of course we categorize everything, extroverted, introvert, or something to that effect. I've always gauged it as how you gain energy. I've always gained
Mm.
energy from like a social battery, if you will. Like, I mean, I can be extrovert. I teach for a living,
Oh,
so
dude.
yeah, I teach safety at the naval bases out here, and so I'm very energetic and animated, talk to all the students. But man, at the end
Right.
of a day of a long day of teaching, I am exhausted, and I just a good day by myself
Yeah.
re-energizes myself and able to go for it. So, but I imagine
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, I imagine with your career though, with being working in teams and talk with patients all the time and just being around people, that's kind of your industry.
It is, and I
Yeah.
think the people that worked with me in the hospital would very much describe me as an extrovert because we had, I was in charge of a 60-person team at
Oh,
Stanford,
wow.
um,
Yeah, it's
and
extensive.
with all the personalities that you would expect, and I was a bit younger, and I was, maybe what you would think of as a leader of a transplant program, you know, and I felt like an extrovert then because I was never alone. I mean, I
Yeah.
was never alone.
Yeah.
Always had people around me.
No, man.
Um, and so this second career that I have now, I'm often alone. I'm usually alone.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
And so that first year out of the hospital, I was like, it's Tuesday morning. Where are all the people? What am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
And it's an adjustment. It truly is.
That time alone helps you use the reflective nature that our brains always go to when we have that time
Yeah.
without stimulus, and then you have the paper in front of you, and now we get to the point where you're publishing stories all the time. So, well, all
Right.
the time,
No,
you know what I
no, it's
mean?
great. And the other part of writing, which is interesting, is I've written a good number of opinion pieces, 25 or 30 or so for,
Oh, wow.
national organizations in the last few years. And what's interesting is that that's such a different muscle, right? It's like, okay,
Mm.
you got 1,000 words to explain why we're not handling the COVID crisis well. And I'm like, okay, 1,000 words. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I've actually enjoyed that. At first, I was kind of pissed off about why do I want to get 1,000 words? I mean, and now I'm really enjoying it because it makes me get into my argument, get out of my argument, and it's a different muscle. Now, of course, when I write a 90,000, 100,000 word book, I can sort of, wander here and there. So writing it's kind of like medicine in a way. There's a lot of different ways to practice it. You can be a transplant doctor like me, you can be a dermatologist, you can be a radiologist, you can be whatever. So it's writing's beautiful. I mean, it's a great thing. I
It's
don't
a
have to tell you
no,
that.
no, I do it for fun. It's just some people look at me like, why do you do that? Like, I don't know. It's just some people are attracted to running a lot, and I'm attracted to sitting down and writing a lot, and it's just how it goes. I think it's a way to, I don't know if it's the same way for you, but expressing oneself can be kind of challenging. I don't, especially for guys, particularly for guys. I work with a lot of
Yeah,
guys, and they're not usually very touchy-feely.
right.
So, don't want to show any kind of vulnerability, and it's just a thing.
Definitely.
So if you're able to have any kind of pent up emotions, irritation, anger, whatever the case may be, a very constructive methodology is writing it down.
No doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I had two older sisters and a mom, and my father passed a number of years ago, and so they read my stuff. And at first they're always worried. Oh man, do you really want to say all of that? And um, I say, yeah, I do.
Hmm.
But I don't even think those people that are closest to me really understand that this is part of what I want to do right now is say all of this.
Hmm. If you look at all the different memoirs that have been published, not just memoirs, but fiction, biographies, how much has everyone already felt that before? So it's not like
Yeah,
it's new thing that all of a sudden,
yeah,
wait, this person who's usually very bubbly and happy has bad feelings too? Like, yes, we all do. We're human. We all have extremely similar emotions and situations. It's just how we handle them and the experiences we have to deal with them in the process.
yeah. And it's interesting when both books have now come out and some of my patients have read it. It's interesting to hear their perspective because they looked at me in a certain way. I was this
That's a good
uber
point too.
confident, kind of fighter pilot mentality. Yeah, we're going to take care of it. Don't you worry. This is a walk in the park. I used to
Yeah.
say stuff like that all the time.
Mhm.
And now they look, they email me and talk to me on the phone. They look at me a little bit differently because
Mhm.
they realize while I was saying and doing all of that, sometimes I wasn't so sure,
Yeah.
and I was down and
Hmm.
affected by all of it. People
Yeah.
dying, it deeply
Right.
affected me.
You wouldn't be human if it didn't affect you in some fashion, in some negative or positive way. I mean,
Right.
it encourages you to do something you would normally do, or it just makes you feel depressed or sad or anxious about going on
Yeah.
to the next day, just to get through the next day. And
Right.
that confidence and that drive to just keep moving can sometimes be the best thing for you. But you do need to stop and smell the roses every once in a while, kind of address those, like, why am I feeling like this? And that's where writing is super therapeutic because you can put
Yeah.
this down. And,
Yeah.
I've had many sessions where I just do like a journal session and I just, as you said, word vomit on the page and I go, okay, I feel better. I vented. I'm feeling good. I haven't caused anyone else to get peeved at me for the words I just said, wrote down. I could put it away. I could throw it away. And then it's able to go off on the right foot for the next day. You're more even keeled.
You got it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
got it. I mean, that's exactly right. That's how I feel about it. And it's interesting, you know how the acknowledgement section of the book, the books that people write, they take on a certain form, right? You thank your agent, you thank your mom,
Yeah.
you thank your book editor. I actually decided for the second book, and I think it's right at the beginning of the acknowledgments, to thank writing. And
Oh, that's
I,
cool.
yeah, and I can't even remember how I said it, but I remember saying something to the effect of, I think that you saved me. I think you really helped me.
That is
And
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, and that's how I really feel about it.
That's awesome. And like I said, it helps with identity and the whole entire themes that it sounds like your book is around. I mean,
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
general. I'm curious with how you got started with the different opinion pieces. Did you seek those
yeah.
people out or did they seek you out?
At first, I sought them out. I basically would find things periodically that I wanted to write about, mostly related to the medical field in some way, although not uniformly, but mostly. And then you go through the same process, Wall Street Journal, are you interested in this? And then they took one of my pieces,
Oh,
for instance.
shoot.
And then, we got some other national publications,
That's awesome.
and then when COVID hit, folks would come to me and say, just call me up from the LA Times, say, or whatever. Do you have an opinion about whether or not somebody should take the vaccine? I'm just
Yeah.
using that as an example. Yeah, I have an opinion about that for
Hmm.
sure. Um, well, can you write us 1,000 words on it? And so I don't, I don't say I'm going to write, four opinion pieces this year, and that's my goal. I
Yeah.
really just keep up with the news like we all do. And if I see something that I want to write about, I write about it.
Cool.
And so sometimes it can happen. I can write two in a month, and then
Yeah.
sometimes I can go 6 months without writing any. And I just keep an eye out there of things that I might be able to write about. And it's the same process. We've certainly submitted a number of things that
Mhm.
have been passed on by a number of national publications, not interested for whatever reason.
That's fine.
And it is fine, and it's not going to stop me from writing them.
No,
And um,
as it shouldn't.
part of it is, in today's world, there's so much content, there's so many things that people can read. I don't want to write what somebody else has written. If somebody has an opinion about COVID that's been expressed 5,000 times, I'm not interested in that.
Especially
I've also been
5,000
asked to write
words.
things that I don't think I have a particularly
Strong opinion
interesting
of.
perspective on. So I turned those down. But I've got one out there right now that, is kind of making the rounds,
Oh, cool.
seeing who's interested. And, it's something I'll continue to do.
With your background, having, your insights, it's always just good. I always like having multiple insights for that kind of thing anyway, because your perspective and experience might be different than another person in the same industry. But I still want to hear both sides of the argument because
Yeah.
that's how we should communicate and prove points to each other is going back and forth. I don't want to just choose one side or the other because you might have a valid point and this person might have a valid point. Kind of how we
Yeah,
figure
no,
stuff out.
definitely. That's right, and it's interesting what happens now with opinion pieces is because I put them up on my social media platforms when I get one of them published, and some people I know say, you got this one wrong. This is bullshit. I mean,
Right, right.
and then some people say, right on, right on, right on. And then other people weigh in that you don't know, in comment sections of the Wall Street Journal or Time or Newsweek or Slate or wherever you publish.
Yeah.
And these folks that don't know you at all say, very, outrageous things. And you have to kind of be ready for that if you're going to do this.
That's very
And
hard.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the world, right?
It
So
is. It is. Well, I actually want to hear real quick before we start wrapping up feedback from readers because I saw you had a healthy amount of reviews on Amazon for
mhm.
for this book. What has been the feedback you've gotten from readers?
It's been, I'm sure every author you have on says that. It really has been great. I mean, it's been
Hmm.
fantastic. I'm gratified by it. It means a lot to me
Good.
when somebody says, I liked your book. It means a lot to me. It's, ego gratification, I guess.
So is.
I'm very interested in what people might put up on Amazon or Goodreads that they didn't like a
Mhm.
portion of the book, say,
Yeah.
or they have some kind of constructive criticism. I don't much like, so Amazon's interesting. I looked a little while ago and I had 60 some odd reviews and nearly all of them were 5 or 4 stars. And then somebody has a 1 star review of my book.
Hmm.
And what always interests me is somebody that puts a 1 star review and then doesn't leave any words to explain.
Yeah. It's like I need
And
more
so,
information.
yeah, because I'm truly curious, like what didn't work for them, because I think this is a
Right.
learning process. I still consider myself early stages,
Hmm.
of my writing career. And I want to know if there's
Hmm.
something that doesn't work. But I mean,
Yeah.
the feedback's been great, and
Good.
I'm gratified by that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, just want to kind of leave everyone on a good note or a good helpful note. If you were to talk to yourself years ago before you started this whole writing journey process, what any advice you'd give your past self?
Yeah, I mean, I think with regard to writing, yes, I would have loved to have started earlier in
Sure.
my career.
You were
I
busy.
published my, yeah, I was a little busy,
Yeah.
and I published my first book in 2021, and so
Okay.
by that time, I'm trying to do the math. I was, what was I, 57?
Okay.
I'm 60 now.
Oh, there you go.
And yeah, would I've liked to have started earlier? Sure. But one issue with writing the kind of books that I want to write, just
Hmm.
me, not anybody else,
Yeah.
is I literally didn't think I had as much to write about earlier in my life as I do now. Um, I first of all, I'm not sure I could have expressed it. So just to say, well, start earlier. Well, I'm not sure. You know, People at a certain age often have a lot of things that they want to say, or they have life experiences that they want to relate to somebody else.
Yep.
The one thing that I see sometimes that I hear about more than I see, I guess, is that somebody wants to be a writer but doesn't really want to spend the time learning the craft.
Hmm.
I took night classes at Stanford when I was dog ass tired from my job, and really did want to learn how to do it well because I don't want to be a dilettante. I want to
Hmm.
actually, you know, if somebody reads something I write, whether it's an opinion piece or a book, I want at least them to think. If they don't like it, that's one thing. But look, he at
Yeah.
least spent some time trying to do it, and he tried to do it well.
Yes.
And that's all. Learn the craft as much as you can. I think there's a lot to learn.
Oh, absolutely. And I will tell you from the last 2 years of doing the podcast, most people I have on here are in their late 40s all the way up to their 70s and 80s. And pulling from life experience is kind of a big thing.
Yeah,
It is marvelous. I mean, just from when I started back writing when I was, 15. I just loved writing stories. It was something I did
yeah,
for fun. Never intended to share it. Never had. You move on to the 30s when I started actually getting serious about writing it. The difference in style and then experience, what I've gone through. By the time I started writing, I had 2 kids, job, wife, house. family, experience all sorts of things, good and bad in the middle. You can definitely see that in what was putting down on paper. The
Yeah.
the experience is there. Just you can always fix the little craft stuff as you go about it,
Yeah.
but if you're pulling from an immature place or really no experience, it's going to be very blasé. So folks who are writing their stories at the age you started, I think it's actually becoming it's more common than you'd think. I talk to a lot of folks who are, like I
Yeah.
said, that age.
Well, that's interesting to hear just because I've wondered, a lot about that.
Hmm.
But what I'm hopeful is, that I can write for the rest of my life,
Oh yeah.
and contribute in some way that somebody wants to read it. That's
Hmm.
and it takes a certain arrogance to say, well, somebody wants to read what I write. It's but that's what I want. You know.
Yes. Oh yeah, we all want that. We all want that. So to actually get people to read your books, where can we find your books at?
They're really anywhere books are sold, but probably the easiest thing to do is just to go to my website, which is David Weil, David Weill.com, and I'm easy to find on social media, and you can keep up with what I'm doing. But the books are available there.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on here today and talk with me. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the thoughtful question.
Anytime, anytime. And as you continue on your author journey and get more books out, I'd love to meet you again and check up on you and see how you're doing with
Thank
the
you.
other books you've got to market. Because
No,
I
thank
love,
you.
yeah, of course, I love to
Yeah, no,
help publish and
yeah.
promote.
No, no, I appreciate that and what you're doing. This is important, and I look forward to listening to your podcast. Like I said before we came on, I've listened to a lot of them. They're good. They're really good. So,
I'm really glad to hear that. It helps me
yeah,
continue what I'm doing because it's a lot of work.
yeah.
It's a lot of
I know it
work.
is. Everybody says that. I've never done it, had a podcast, but everybody says it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of
So
work, but it's a labor of love. So, you talk to people about all that you like and enjoy, and I love to talk to people and get to know them. So it kind of all just works out. Yes.
good. Keep on keeping on, as they say.
Yeah. You as well. You as well. All right,
All
guys. I
right.
hope
Thanks, Ryan.
of course, guys, I really hope you'd enjoy this. Please go check out David's stuff. Follow his online presence, his social media. Go on and just enjoy wonderful, wonderful bouts of fiction and even a memoir if you are so inclined to read. I hope that we all have a great rest of your day. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading.